We're live. It's 7:20, a little bit late, and I wasn't able to do a morning morning show like I'm on TV. A morning show this morning. We had a soccer game that we had to run off to, and in fact, I have another one tomorrow. But I don't think I'll miss any of the either the morning wake up show or the late night one. And I'll have another video going up. And the video that I am working on now, I've already finished. Just doing the editing on it now. And that is a comparison or an illustration on how centrifugal superchargers change the shape of the power curve. Basically, they allow the motor or push the motor to make power at a higher engine speed because they're artificially improving VE. Basically, we have a rising boost curve and a rising airflow. So it overcomes what the motor wants to do naturally and says, hey, look, I know you want to sign off here at 5,500, but guess what? I came to party. We're going to keep going. And so that will be a good illustration on what's going on with those. And the photo that I have up now is upside down. So yay for the guys in Australia. At least for right now, I will probably go back and flip it. What I have to do is send it to myself and then send it back and turn it over and adjust it. And I don't know why when I take a photo from what I have on my computer and just put it up, for some reason, YouTube flips it and doesn't give me an option to flip it around. At least not that I know of. It could be that I don't know what I'm doing. But when I go and send it to my phone and then flip it a couple of times and then resave it and then resend it and then load it, it all works out fine. So I'm not sure what's going on there. I'm not sure what the situation or what the general unhappiness is about the photo. But if you take a look at the photo, it is me laying across seductively, as it were, a twin turbo big block Chevy. And I think the turbos that are on there are two GT45 turbos. So we know right away that they're going to be good. And they have a lot going for them. The two things that they have going for them more than anything else is that, one, they're really inexpensive. I think one of those turbos we bought for $163 or something. But at any rate, they're going to be a couple $100. I mean, even if they're $300, that's really inexpensive. And if you get two of those, let's say that they were costing $300 and you get two of them for $600, that's more than 1,500 horsepower worth of turbos. They've worked really good for me so far. So those are good performance buys, whether you get them for the guys at Max Speeding, who I am talking to actually about possible sponsorship, but I need to test their pieces first to see if I need to walk that. It's a fine line. I need to find out whether or not these things are going to work. I've tried a bunch of DNA stuff and I've tried a couple of their turbos. And so far the turbos that I've tried of theirs, the GT3582s, have worked fairly well, but I want to give it more time to see what's going on before I test stuff and say, hey, look, I did this with these and it did this and it worked. I know that a lot of guys are even though I've run, like I still have some of the 76 millimeter turbos that I got from CX Racing. I don't have them. I think Jason has them, but I still have access to them and we've used them for other tests, even from way back in 2010. So that's a long time and we've used them a lot. So I can pretty safely say, hey, look, those are what you would expect from something that costs so little. And they work really well and they've made the power every time we've done it. I'm not saying that turbo or any of these turbos that I would get, these low dollar ones, are anywhere near what you would get from a real Garrett or, potentially even a Borg Warner. But the thing that they will do is they will make boost and they will make power. And we know that one single GT45 would do 750 or more. And so two of them are going to be, in the 1,500 or 1,600 range. In fact, they would be more likely to do more as twins than they would as a single, depending on what motor you're trying to run it on, because what you've done is effectively make the motor smarter or smaller when you put twins on them. You're just going to have a lot less back pressure. So since they have less back pressure, we can get to the flow limit of the compressor side of the turbo, and that's where we want to be. We don't want to be hot side limited. We want to get to the flow rate of the compressor side, whatever that is. So we want to, and since we don't have maps for these, there's no way for me to tell you, oh, it needs to be right here, and this is the best island of efficiency based on our flow rate and our power output. I could tell you that if I could see the map. there are no maps for those. So I can't tell you that. What I can tell you is that we've run them, and we've run these GT45s on 454s and 2.4s. And so, they work on lots and lots of stuff. And I would like to see a map though, because I like to find out on some of these, like how close we were to the surge line, especially on some of the smaller motors. We know that we were getting near the hot side limit, definitely at or near the hot side limit when we were running one of those on a big block, because it had really, really high back pressure. And that's a perfect indication of what's going on. It's pretty responsive, but not ideal, especially for not a sustained load, because high back pressure is not going to be a good situation. If we only wanted to run 5 pounds or something like that, it might work okay. Honestly, I'd pick something a little bit bigger than that for a big block of any displacement or manufacturer, whether it's a 455 or whatever. But if you're starting out, the thing is, if you're starting out, even if it's a big block, if we're starting out with a motor that still only makes 350 horsepower, let's say, we can get away with one of those turbos. If your NA motor is making 450 or 550 or 650, then you should think about a much, much bigger turbo. The thumbnail that I was going to put up today, that I wanted to put up because I wanted to talk about power curves, is I have an illustration, a boost curve difference between a turbo and a blower and a centrifugal blower, and it's, as you might imagine, it's fairly dramatic. So I was kind of wanting to go over that, but at the last minute threw in the twin turbo thing, because twin turbo big blocks are really cool. And the nice thing is, just like with an LS, if we go get a Gen 6 and put a cam in it and springs in it, and yes, you can leave the factory fuel injection on there, just put bigger injectors in it, and then run boost to that from one of these inexpensive turbos, you can have a turbo big block, and it's going to be a thumping machine. It's going to make lots of torque. As we saw, if you take a look at the 8.1, we made some, it was a 496, and we made some pretty healthy torque numbers from very little boost and no modifications, essentially. We haven't even put a cam or anything in it yet. And we know that a near 500-inch motor has lots and lots of potential for power. And it's fairly easy to get because we have so much displacement. So all we need to do is give it the things that it needs. It definitely needs something more than a stock camshaft. I'm fairly certain it's going to respond to ported cylinder heads and those kinds of things. And definitely intake manifolds. I'm excited about testing the Dart intake manifold on the 8.1. But the thing that really makes it go, just like with any combination, is if we add boost to it, obviously good things happen. And that's the way it is with anything. That's the way that it was with the little inline 6-cylinder 292 or the 4200 or any LS motor or a 5-liter or a Buick or a 440 or a Cadillac. Some of those I broke. That's all part of the deal, though. It's part of the learning experience. If you don't break stuff, then you're not trying stuff and you're not learning stuff. It'd be nice to put them all on and just have it go perfectly, but that hasn't really been my experience. Maybe it's the experience of other people in other places, but that hasn't been my experience. But boost does help a lot. And one of these days, what I'm going to do is we're going to get together for one of these live feeds. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to read you guys the comments that I get. So we'll go through, I'll switch over to the comment section from some recent video, and then I'll ask you guys the questions that I get asked, and we'll see what answers you guys have. So it'll be a fun little adventure. So you guys can see what and from being here too, some of the things that we have to deal with. But it is Saturday night. It's not date night. That was last night. Oh, but it is. I went for a really long run today, which was good, except that when I got home, nobody was here, and I didn't bring keys with me because I felt like I was a lost puppy or something. I had Lisa go drive me over to a soccer game, and I was watching some friends of my son play soccer, and then I was just going to run home. And then when I was running home, everybody had left, and I didn't bring a key with me. So I also had to be like a cat burglar and, make my way in. It all worked out. It all worked out very well. So let's see what you guys got going on. The big block stuff, awesome. Like I said, 2 turbos, very good. In this particular instance, that motor, I think, may have been the one that we did that I'm considering for the Big Bang. I'm still trying to figure out why the thing doesn't want to, why it wants to make the same horsepower and torque number, which we don't want, and why it won't rev. Why I want it to be like a 6,500 RPM motor, and right now it's a 5,500 RPM motor, which is not ideal, even though we tried a different camshaft, which I was pretty certain the specs would do what I wanted it to do, but it hasn't done that yet. We even put a single plane intake manifold on it, which would kill all the torque, and so far it's not worked. But in truth, I haven't run it in a long time. I'm sure it's been a year or two now. So let's see what you guys got going on. And I'm scrolling. Richard, you should test and see if doing a wet nitrous shot on a plate versus a dry shot on the same plate and compensating in the tune makes a difference in power. I don't think it will. Usually the power output dictated by the nitrous is the amount of nitrous that you supply. I think you may. Are you worried about getting a distribution problem there or something? Is it true that the Aussie turbos spin counterclockwise? Maybe. I want a quick truck. I need torque. David, we talk about that every time we're here. I talk about that in every video that I show you horsepower and torque curves on. So every time we talk about torque. I'm just thinking ahead, but I'm thinking somebody's probably going to have to go. Let's see. Have you had an eBay turbo come apart? I beat the heck out of mine. A CRX Racing turbo for years, no problems at all. I haven't had, I've only ever had one turbo break in any testing, and it was a comp turbo, and it broke when we started the motor, basically. What's the most turbos you can connect together? I've always wanted to do 8 turbos, kind of like I think Boosted did those. But I don't want to do them with individual cylinders. I want to connect them all. All I want to know is, did you use a sanding disc to prepare the deck surface on the Gen 5 twin turbo big block? I don't think so. A sanding disc would be like using a tool. That'd be pretty high dig. Casey, that's right. We do need a poll. Okay. Okay, so the poll for tonight, do you run cheap turbos on your project motors? Boom. Richard, do you plan to run turbo exhaust out the back of the vehicle? It's a Ford. Oh, Richard, plan to run turbo exhaust out the back of the vehicle. 462 valve, single 78, 3-inch pipe to the rear is planned, but is that too big? It's not too big. It can't be too big. Boosted lifestyle, that's who it is. Bigger heads seem to equate to better power everywhere. Then do manufacturers make smaller heads at all? Is the drivability better with a smaller intake? I don't think that the first statement is true. Putting together a GTX 2860, a little better than 10-to-1 static. What motor is that on? Fiddler talking about torque, all these down tests at wide open throttle from 4,000 to 6,500. Very few would be doing that spread. Most of them would be 3 to 65. Give a misleading impression of what you want in a car for cruise night and cars and coffee. If you tell me or you ask me what you want for cars and coffee, I can tell you what you need for that. Richard, would you consider doing a build-up of 267, the most hated small block? I thought that was the 305. Is a 267 going to be really hard to find? I think it would be, right? JR, I was going to say it made 15,000 more when I did a hood dump. That's a lot. What dictates how much vacuum a cam will make? Lots of things. The displacement of the motor is the biggest thing. What's a good turbo kit for an R18? I don't know. I don't know about kits. Do you need a carbon seal for a draw through? Yes. The cheap turbos don't have it, but I think that that's going to be a situation where it doesn't last indefinitely. And lucky for us, for me to just run a quick test on it, it's not going to have to run indefinitely. Have you run a tune port with Vortec heads? I haven't, because I haven't ever run a Vortec lower TPI manifold. What's really the difference between running turbos under the hood and running them up under your car? Are you talking about remote turbos? If they're remote mount turbos, the lag can be different between those two. Honda D15 block. Cheap turbo G10 build. Turbo costs $25 from a Volvo. The wrecking yard stuff. For smaller displacement motors, there's lots to choose from the wrecking yard. Your dyno testing showed that there was no downside to smaller intake runner heads in regards to power. That, again, that's not accurate. If you look at the port volume test, you'll see that the 195 head made more low speed power than the 210 or the 225 head. So that's not accurate. You're trying to do universal things that are not universally applicable. What's the threshold for a cheap turbo? I think three or $400 is pretty cheap. I mean, I'm just basing it on I've seen turbos that are anywhere from a couple to several $1,000s. Well, Zach, you don't have to have made the jump yet, but just that you want to. Best intake for a 454 LS all pro cylinder heads. I don't know. You should. I probably haven't tested an intake that would work on that combination. It's probably one of these Frankenstein things or these Billy goodness deals. Can you test the Holly Skyrim intake with a centrifugal supercharger? Nope, nothing would blow apart. In the shop, putting a new oil pump in my LY5. Does the 4th gen aluminum 5.3 have the same push rod stock as an iron LQ4? Yes. I think that all of the LS stuff, I don't know about the LS7, but all of the other ones have the same push rod length. I'm pretty sure. Thought it was interesting that the iron intake was stock 2-barrel, outperformed the modified engines in your own test at 3,000 and below. I think you're making a statement and seeing one test and then attributing it to others, because I don't remember a 2-barrel doing better than other stuff. I know specifically when I ran a 2-barrel versus a 4-barrel on a small block Chevy, the 4-barrel was better everywhere. It would surprise me if a 2-barrel intake manifold ever made more power than a 4-barrel intake manifold, even at 2,000 RPM. Do not run eBay wastegate. I tend to stay away from those, although we have tested some of them. The CX Racing stuff we've run on Hondas, although it was on their Honda, so I wasn't too concerned about it. But they do tend to not be consistent with their spring evaluations and the ultimate boost. Would you trust an eBay turbo with an internal wastegate? I think I would want to test it to make sure. And the thing that I don't tend to like about internal wastegates is that they don't have a lot of flow rate. So a lot of times they don't have really good control. I know back in the day, like with the internal wastegate T3 stuff from the SVO Mustangs and the T-Birds and the Mercurs, Dave from Tiny Avenger used to do porting on the wastegate housing to try to improve their control. Where's your pineapple and bacon pizza? No, I had Murillo's, which is a local place here. Mexican food is really good. Zach, I absolutely intend to run cheap turbos on my small bills. I would recommend them. I mean, the thing is, if I tried in our case, one of them was $163. If I tried $163 turbo, and even if it lasted 5 minutes, and I got a couple pulls out of it, that's money well spent. Look at the Performer RPM Pontiac head and compare that to the AFR 210, and you would think that the Pontiac head would be superior, but it's not. Does AFR make a Pontiac head? I don't understand what you're comparing there, Larry. Camaro, Richard, do you know Dave Weiser? Yeah, I've spoke with him many times. He's supposed to be doing a 2.2 turbo Dodge head for me. It's been a while, but we'll see what happens. If you take a look up on his channel, and I recommend everybody watch David. He's, the guy's a legend. He's done a lot of cool stuff. He's, he's sometimes out there, which I like personally, but he does a lot of cool stuff and has done like legendary stuff in this industry going all the way back. But I sent him that 2.2 head and he has it up on his channel. He's done some stuff with it. Are Summit turbos considered legit? I don't know who does those for Summit. I know that Borg Warner stuff, some of like their S475s, their S series stuff are Borg Warner turbos, I think. Rick Lewis had a sloppy stage 3. I'm still to this day surprised that thing fits stock piston and valve. Have you ever tested an eBay turbo to the authentic turbo? The thing is, I don't know. I never know if we have like an eBay version of the turbo. By the time the eBay version of the turbo comes out, usually the original version has been discontinued and they're making a better one already. So I don't think we have the original one to do it, to test it with. I have tested two 76 millimeter turbos, which I didn't measure and I should have, but the way that they promote it is that from CX Racing, this is our 76 millimeter turbo. I can't remember if that's the red cup or the blue cup. That's how they rated them. It's so awesome. I should have made a shirt for that. But I tested that versus a 76 millimeter turbo, like a real one from Precision. And the difference was about 500 horsepower in favor of the Precision. Let's see. Someone's talking about 318s. I'm curious about that. 318 is exactly 318, 340s of the potential, 93%, and both were prepared equally. Tony plans to retain all the disadvantage of the 318 and not prepare equally. So is somebody doing did somebody say that Uncle Tony is doing some sort of comparison between a 318 and a 340 or something? I hope he has somebody help him put the motors together. Does cheap turbo mean faster engine build destruction? No, it just means more power. I mean, if an NA motor is good, but a boosted motor is good plus all the boost. I want to do a turbo, but I have to tear it into a completely good running 5,000 mile engine to open the ring gap. Do you? If you want to run 7 pounds on it, just do it. We've done that a lot. And Edelbrock has a bigger valve, 215 ports, modeled after a Rammer 5. But if it's modeled after a Rammer 5, that was like, I don't know, 50 years ago. So you would think that a modern AFR head would be better, right? The max speed, the limited amount of max speeding stuff that I've tested has worked so far. I don't know who grinds Summit cams for them. He's building an OEM 318 and trying to make it as good as he can. Meaning what? Is he taking the block and throwing away everything else and then putting a steel knife edge super double throwdown crankshaft and of course long rods because rod ratio, and then all the compression, and then billet heads, and like what is he trying to do here? They're trying to see how much horsepower they can get out of using OEM parts on a Rochester 2-barrel carb. David, Vizard's helping. Well, if Vizard's helping, they should do well then. Richard, what cheap turbos do you put on a ported and polished GT40 setup? What power level do you want? That's the question that you need to ask. You need to ask yourself. That's going to determine what turbos you use. Is there a way to make the 4.8 rev faster? Yeah, you could make it rev faster by detaching everything from it, meaning the transmission and the rear end and the tires and all that stuff, and then just free rev it, and it'll rev up really quick. If you put a aluminum flywheel on it, it will rev up faster, but it will free rev faster, but it won't necessarily rev faster in the car because that weight is not what's dictating the acceleration rate of the 4.8. The power output is. The power output, and then all of those loaded things that I was talking about, the vehicle weight, the gearing, everything, the tires, wheels, the drive shaft, the transmission, all of those things. So even if you could, and you could take the motor and put a really lightweight rotating assembly, a tiny little, like a Tilton triple disc clutch and no flywheel, and make it, high compression and super snappy. And then if you attach it to all of this stuff, you may or may not get it to accelerate faster. You probably would, because it would make more power, which is the thing that would make it accelerate better. But you could do the same thing if you put a camshaft in it, or cylinder heads, or those kinds of things. Fiddler, I'm curious as to what camshaft they would get out of that. Getting 1 horsepower per cubic inch is not terribly hard, even with stock stuff. I mean, we did that with a 302, although we did use a 4-barrel and not a 2-barrel though. JR, I do too. I wish that he was not like he is. I wish that he was more like Dave. Dave and I get along great. So that's all coming from his side. I've reached out to him many times. Had any more thoughts on the L33 Big Bang? Yeah, I probably won't do that. If I do one with Tom Nelson, it probably would be an iron one. But I'm leaning towards 5.3 though. David, your VS Racing wastegate worked great on your twin 6762s. Did you? Oh yeah, 2 wastegates, right, for twins. I want a turbo to make 80 horsepower max. There probably is that out there, right? Chris, we don't use main studs on any of the Big Bang motors. We use stock main bolts. The problem with using main studs is you're going to have a line board if you do that. And so we never do that. We just use the stock stuff. Yeah, the main support and the block structure is not going to be what goes away on a stock bottom end motor, and not for 1200 horsepower. Silverado 5.3 VS Racing 7875 truck Norris. How much horsepower will stock fuel lines? The stock fuel rail will go to the limit of that turbo. So you can run the stock fuel rail. I don't know about the lines going because I don't know what size they are, but you need 1,000 horsepower with a fuel flow. I think he wants to use a stock cam, carb, intake, and compression. I just don't know what he means by stock cam. There are actually several different 318 cams that were used during the span of 318 development. Is he using an LA motor? Is he using a Magnum? It makes me want to put together a 318 stock one. 2001 4.8 Silverado. I want to change to a 5.7. Well, you can make that motor into a 5.7. Well, no, you can't. Not on a 4.8. Well, you could if you change the crank too. But you could bore that thing out to 3.905 and just put pistons in it and make it 330 something inches, I think. All right, Sleeper, go get that bacons. Bacons. Richard, have you ever noticed what effect the intake runner control valve has on horsepower or torque during the time of travel between the short and long positions? Well, what application is that? What we do is for those things like for a GSR or I'm trying to think where else, the 462 valve or 464 valve, when you're transitioning, you make the transition so that you upset the curve as little as possible. So if you get a big jump when you change over, then you move it back. So you want the transition to be as smooth, and that's basically all that you can do. And I don't know if changing the rate of change of that will have any effect because I honestly have never measured how quickly that stuff happens. Goodman, because the torquing of the studs, you'll have way more force on the studs than you will on the bolts because the bolts are going to stretch. There's going to be the mains are going to deform. Whenever we put studs in, and if If you measure bearing clearance, it's going to change when you put studs in it. That's why I would recommend boring it. What injectors do you use on the 383 TPI engine? I don't know, probably whatever we had around, but anything from, I think, well, I don't know if the 36. The 36 will do that. Yeah, 36 pounders were more than enough. I'd probably use those white fast ones, but anything from there up to 80s, all of that would work. Richard, have you done a video on compression ratio to spool rate for turbo? More compression will help, but only because it will add more low-speed power. Low-speed power is what you're looking for to improve the spool rate of a turbo. Anything that improves that is going to help. So compression does that. Displacement does that. Sometimes you could do that with runner length. Very rarely can you do that with camshaft. Any new videos coming out? Yeah, the one I'm working on now is centrifugal supercharger stuff. Richard, do you measure brake-specific fuel consumption more on the carbureted stuff than on the fuel-injected stuff, the way that we have the dyno hooked up for fuel flow? And brake-specific fuel consumption is not a concern for me at wide open throttle because you're not trying to get fuel mileage at wide open throttle. So it's at fine threads at the top, that increases the clamping force by 1.4 times. That's a lot. Like the idea of a Big Bang LA 318. I wouldn't expect a whole bunch from that. JR, I don't know what your question is. Compression versus valve size. I don't know what you're asking there. I have a lot of, as a matter of fact, I made a list because I was going to challenge those guys to a build off for a 318. Having never built one, I thought for sure that the odds would be ever in their favor. But I have a lot of things that I can do to a motor that it's something that dyno guys would know about. And David probably is pretty sharp on that stuff. I have a 5.3 stage 2 cam, 243 heads, running a carb LS. What's a good add-on? Hopefully you have headers on it, and a nitrous plate under the carburetor would be really good. Somebody already suggested nitrous. JR Rivers, I just answered the question about spool time. Whatever adds more low speed power, is going to improve spool rate. So that's what you want to do. So whatever does that, whatever improves low speed power, that's what you want to do. Ever tried compressed air to the hot side to spool it? No, I haven't. Do I know Andy Woods? I don't think so, although the name kind of sounds familiar. I have a set of 2-inch valves. Is there any advantage using them in a 5.3? Yes, there is. That you will improve the flow if you put a bigger valve in it, and also if you unshroud the stock valve. But if you unshroud a 2-inch valve in the chamber, you'll definitely get more flow. I have a Cam carb based on David Vizar's knowledge, but I got it on a 110 instead of a 107 because I'm fuel injected. That doesn't matter. The only thing that you've done by adjusting that is change idle quality, and you change idle quality whether it's carbureted or fuel injected. That's one thing that David's formula misses. Is it's not. We all know, because everybody that's done any camshaft testing knows that as you tighten the LSA, it can improve the power, but what it does do is diminish idle quality. So are you looking for, what combination of those things are you looking for? You're not just looking for a formula to tell you that this cam will make power. And I would like to see that tested like lots of times to see what's going on there. But it's not the only question that people ask when they're getting a camshaft. That's why the Truck Norris cam sells so well. That's why other cams sell so well, because it does a combination of things. It idles the way people want it to idle. It drives the way people want it to drive. It adds power where they want it to add power. It sounds the way that they want it to sound. It costs what they are willing to spend on these kinds of things that they want. There's a lot of factors that go into the thought process for a camshaft choice. Do you run cheap turbos on your project motor? 58% are saying yes and 42% saying no. We're a little bit split there. Read your Mopar Bible. There's a lot of inaccuracies in that. Spending time with Freiberger and Dulcich, they rattled off a few of those. Saw the guy with an LS headed 306. He got it started. Is that what cam would you use for that? Does he have it running with the stock camshaft? And do all the lifters line up with the lifter positions for the LS head? I'm kind of curious about that. Where can you get a t-shirt? I don't have that set up yet. Cliff, how much ring gap do you have in it? You said that you opened it up another 2000s. 2000s is nothing. I want to make a shirt, ethanol in my glass, not in my gas. It's pretty easy for people to make shirts themselves. Stock cam, but had to realign a couple of push rods. Is 128 formula just for a ballpark? I understand what it is and how it works. Getaway, you're trying to get a frame for the Killer Bee shirt. Howard's cam, your Ford 300, and I've got Howard's cam and my Ford 300 with an LS head. So did you have a LS headed 300? Is it running? Is it working? Has it been on the dyno? And was it done to match the rocker positions of those heads? You'll be shirtless. Karen, that name has actually been tossed around before, but it didn't fly. There may be something different. A hot mess. Richard, what guy are we speaking of? I don't know who you're talking about. Saw a couple of videos of ethanol extraction from gasoline. I'm not sure why. See, I'm onto something that you came up with an idea that somebody came up with 2 or 3 years ago. Getaway, you want to manufacture cams? What's the most surprising thing you've run across on the dyno? The most recent thing was when I ran the LS9 camshaft and we advanced the camshaft and it didn't add a bunch of power like I wanted it to. Cliff, are you talking about increasing your ring gap from 17 to 19? And is this on the motor that blew up? It needs to be 5 or 7 more. Yes, the LS300 is running. Push rods lined up. I've not dynoed it. I would like to. Where is it at? Where are you at? And what intake manifold is on it? And what is it? What are the cam specs? You got to throw us some deets, man. Yeah, a turbo anything needs more than 17 thousandths gap. That's why it's breaking. That's why you're breaking ring lines. Wheelbase, doing a quick scan of the interwebs, take something like a 234 at 50 cam to get past 1 horsepower per cube on a 318 with stock heads and small valves. That's with the 4-barrel. That seems a little big to me to get that kind of power. My first set of cheap turbos were in 2003. Oh, a third gen RX-7 with an LS1. I do like third gen RX-7s. Piston Ranch is a channel, and he says the 300 is stock from the deck down. What about not running the oil ring? I wouldn't do that in any kind of street car. Is 157 kilowatts from a 4-liter inline 6 from a 94 from 1994 good? I don't know what the conversion is for kilowatts. Somebody throw me that really quick. 1 point something, right? Kilowatt to horsepower, 1.34. So 200 horsepower from a 4-liter, is that what you're talking about? There's a party going on next door. Got some dual carb intake manifold. Oh, you're in Iowa. Cool. I do like the Gen 3 RX-7s. I would like a stock one. Putting a TPI on an L31 for a truck application, you should be looking at something that's like 218, 224. So Camaro, you want to do another guys, Briggs and Stratton? I don't have a dyno to run Briggs and Stratton stuff. More Trophy 4 stuff is coming, and we're still waiting on the rods. Actually, they were supposed to be here a long time ago. People hollering, door slamming at your place, Eric. Is that what you're talking about? Fiddler, the tall decks, big block Chevys have 4 rings on them too. Hayden, if I had an LQ9 with BTR truck Norris cam, would I use 862 or factory 317 heads? What are you trying to do? What are you trying to achieve? I would use those for different things. Andy Woods is helping David. I may have spoken to Andy on when I was on Uncle Tony's live feed, maybe. Marvin Burks passed away. I remember that. Kind of get what you pay for in turbos. Factory seems to work good to a point. Big mods, ECU, injectors, top and bottom, and spend the money. I don't know what's going on there. Trophy for fuel economy truck in the future. No, that would not be a good fuel economy motor. A 234 cam is bigger than a Boss 302 cam, but they did have good heads though. The 862 706 heads will definitely make more power than a 317 head. You're going to have it tuned, and they're going to have to be mindful on timing and stuff so that you don't get into detonation. But it will make more power, and it'll get better fuel mileage as long as you tune it correctly. Do you have a 3/4 build shirt? Nope, I don't have a jumping Coke can one either. Big block Chevy, how much time are you pulling for a 400 shot to start with? How much power is the NA motor, and how much timing, and what kind of fuel are you using, and all that? But 4 per 100 is is not unusual. You have a dyno session scheduled for your 3 Gen 2 LT4 on the 22nd. I can't wait. Hoping for 500 wheel horsepower would be a lot. I'm guessing it's a high compression, big cam stuff. It would have to make that kind of power. And it's a ported head too, I think, if I remember right. Michael, that small block with a turbo is going to work good. I thought that somebody said that the 2.2 heads were, or that the same guy did the slant 6 head too. Three-quarter race. Lisa's full race. I actually had specific rules drawn up. And by drawn up, I mean that I drew them up. I wanted to do something along those lines that was all stock. That was any factory. My thing was any factory 2-barrel, whatever, any Dodge factory 2-barrel, factory intake manifold, cylinder head, no porting on the head, because I didn't want him going to David Vizard and me going to somebody else, because I'm not going to port it. I mean, I could try, but or if the rule is that he had to port it and I had to port it, that would be fine for me. But no porting on the head. Porting modifications you can make to the manifold, but you can't make it fit a 4-barrel. It has to run a factory 2-barrel. Otherwise, you can do port matching and porting and things like that on the. It has to run stock exhaust manifolds. It has to run a stock cylinder head that's unmodified. It doesn't have to be unmodified, but it could be. It can't be ported though. So you can change. You can put any valve size in it that you want, any valve job. It has to be a flat tappet cam. I was going to allow camshafts. But still with a 2-barrel manifold, any sort of hydraulic flat tappet camshaft. So if he was smart, we would both be looking at like short track cams. I could do it with a stock cam too. And stock exhaust manifolds and stock pistons and stock rods and stock crank and stock block. Even with a pancake tank, how much taller would a raised deck big block be? You could get a rough idea from the deck height change, But I don't know about the thing that I don't know about is the deck height. Plus, I don't know about the intake manifolds for a tall deck. How much the total height difference would be from that. I recently bought an 88 Shelby Z with an 89 2.5 in it. That's good. That's a good one to have. You want a 2.5? More torque. AFR 227s. Oh, so I thought that you had ported LT4 heads in that, but AFR 227s are even better. Biggish cam 12.4, coil and plug, E85. Yeah, that's all the stuff. Let me know how it does. I'm curious to see. Does he want to offer twin scroll manifolds for LS? Yeah, they offer the things that you can do to build them, and also Holley's new exhaust manifold is designed for twin scroll turbos because it has the feed is dedicated to one side, and then the exhaust from the other side of the block is channeled to the other side is what I'm getting, and so that would be a twin scroll. If even a smaller 302 makes more power anywhere, why does AFR make a 165 and TFS make a 170 head? What Aaron, what is it you want to happen? What thing do you want to have happen here? I don't understand. Those heads work very well, and they work very well for mild applications. Guys make lots of power with them. Most small block Chevy cams I see say install 4 degrees. Most cams that are OEM not OEM, but off the shelf cams have 4 degrees built into them. 4 degrees of advance built into them. It helps with eventual chain slop when that happens. But what is the biggest factory two barrel? Well, for me, the biggest factory two barrel would be the 500 ZFM two barrel that they ran in the center of a 6-pack. That's what I would use. That was one of my tricks. You can look at the intake ports with no bore scope. No, there would be teardown. It would be Engine Master's level of stuff because I put money on it. Yeah, I would imagine if he's getting David involved, that they would be doing porting on both things, certainly the heads and the intake manifold, because ultimately the head will help. But the thing is, even if you port the heck out of the head and you have a 2-barrel intake manifold, a factory 2-barrel intake manifold that hasn't been modified, it's going to be pretty limiting. You should do an Oldsmobile diesel. Could a 2-barrel handle a turbo? Yeah, we ran a 2-barrel with a turbo on the 292 inline 6-cylinder. We ran a 4412 Holley, but a 2-barrel would work. I don't know about a Rochester 2G though. I don't know how that works under boost. All we did was throw a ton of jet at the 500 2-barrel because it's obviously not a blow-through carburetor easy either. But what I liked about it is our carb hat bolted right to it. It just had an offset air filter stud. All right, man, go see your family. All right, Admiral, we'll see you. First time getting into V8s, I have a 5.3 LM7 862 heads. I'm trying to build it. You should use the heads that you have. Those work really well. You can port those. You can put bigger valves in them. That's the cheap way to do it. You can port them yourself. And there's lots of camshafts available. Depends on how much power you want to make. Do you have any plans to test an LV3? I already have the video up, but I haven't run one with boost yet. Sneak a 4412 with the annual discharge on the engine. No, there's no sneaking. It has to all be legit. Turbo I have for my burnout LS is from an airplane, 88100. Yeah, I wonder what that originally cost, Brian. Is a wider duration on the exhaust cam help with scavenging? I don't think it's specifically for scavenging. It does help it make power. 214, 224. Yeah, that's a 10-degree split. That's not even really big. That's kind of normal-ish. 8 to 10 is pretty standard. Andy is a carb guru. The carb will be a Rochester. It was a factory on 1 or 2 years on the 318. So it's going to be a 2G then? Because the 318 2-barrel is what all of the inline, the slant 6 guys put on theirs. It's what I think it's the same carburetor that they ran on the or it's the one that they upgrade on the Super 6. I'm still doing stuff on the 3800, yes. Richard, like to see the infamous 4.3 liter LT V6 Big Bang. They've run a couple at Brian Tooley Racing and they've had problems with oiling on those. Fiddler, that's actually a test I'd like to do. I'd like to do a carburetor that we could change to annual discharges. I'd like to see that. I'd like to see what it does because I don't think I've tested that specifically on a carburetor. Could I build an LM7 5.3 to 500 horsepower? It's going to take boost to do that. Maybe give Dave Visor a buzz if you want to. If I want to do what? Is it worth porting 799 heads on a turbo application on a street truck? No. Anything below 1,000 horsepower, you don't need to port the heads. 862 and 706s give you the same power. The 862 ahead is a different casting, so maybe you could use that. I've run 706 on lots of turbo stuff. I know the thumbnail is upside down. That's a salute to my Australian friends, to the boys down under. I did want to use stock exhaust manifolds too. Brian, I put the email up all the time. And it's also up in my bio or something on YouTube or in the description. Did the LV3 with just DOD delete have oiling issues? I don't know if they had LV3s or LV1s. I need to ask Brian about that. Hello? Did you
call Nana?
No. Why was I supposed to?
No, she.
Okay. Okay. Got to call my mom. Moms are always important, right? And on that note, it's time to go. I have some important calls to make. Thank you guys all for showing up. I'm going to close out our poll at 53% and 47%, kind of evenly split, but the 53% are people actually running cheap turbos, so that's good because I run those myself. Thank you guys all for showing up, and I will be back in the morning. Pew. Pew.